Welcome, Brooke. It's really good to see you still in your party clothes. Makes me really happy. Um, we're going to have a conversation about VibeCamp, which you've just come back from. And before we do, I thought it's useful for me to set just a little bit of context. So
Mm.
this video is going on the Micro Solidarity channel, and Micro Solidarity is a collection of practices for building the structures of belonging, like building the structures for community where people can feel like they've found their tribe and then get activated and do stuff together. And so that's kind of like the context that I'm coming from, the background I'm coming from is this community building practice. And your vibe camp thing is kind of coming from a slightly different world with a lot of overlap. And so I'm keen with this conversation that we sort of introduce your world to my world and vice versa.
Yes.
To get kicked off, can you just introduce a little bit of like, what the hell is a vibe camp?
It was hilarious and pretty unexpected for me when I got in Austin a week before VibeCamp started. So I was hanging out with people, going to meetups and parties and things like that. And that was the question. Just over and over again, people walking up to me, what is VibeCamp? And even attendees were like, Brooke, what are we doing? What is VibeCamp? And it was something that I touched on in the opening ceremonies when we arrived, was that we don't really have an answer yet. It's something that's it's a little bit new. I mean, it was similar to a festival, it was similar to a conference, it was similar to a retreat, but I don't think it was quite any one of those things. It doesn't fit neatly into any of those boxes. And what I told people when we opened was that we're kind of building it together. We're going to see what it becomes together, and their experiences over the weekend, the friendships that they make, and what they come away with it. Like, that's going to inform what VibeCamp becomes. But to be a little bit more legible than that, what I've been telling my normie friends is that it was a conference or a festival for extremely online nerds. I've been on Twitter for a little over 2 years now, I think, and have met just some of the most amazing people I've met in my life, and some real strong friendships have been formed. And I see it happening with people I don't even interact with. They're just it's a burgeoning community, a collection of communities, probably even. And we wanted to get together and meet each other and take these friendships and connections to a deeper level.
Yeah, awesome. It's been really obvious to me as someone who's kind of involved, but like I haven't participated in any meetups or anything, but I'm like aware and kind of participating in the conversations on Twitter. It really feels like a scene that has come alive, and it is I'm identifying it as the scene of extremely online people, meaning people whose majority of their meaningful social connections are happening online. The people who have learned how to do that well, that's not a bad thing, it's a good thing.
Right.
And just in the last couple of weeks, there's been multiple gatherings of these people coming together, sometimes for the first time, and encountering the flesh and be like, wow, you're even more exciting in person than just through these little tweets. So that's really super exciting to witness. It may be useful just to have a bit more of the kind of practical nuts and bolts stuff, like how big, how many days, and also some of the lead up, like what kind of stuff did you have to do to pull this thing off?
Sure. Yeah. So check-in was at 5 p.m. on Friday, March 4th. Checkout was 12 noon on Sunday. So it was just those 2 nights. We stayed in cabins. It was located at a children's summer camp. And we found that location so serendipitously. I was in conversations fairly early on. This is the one thing that I had not talked about publicly very much, are the scope of my ambitions with these things, because a lot of people did not think I could pull off VibeCamp. So I kind of held back on saying that VibeCamp is just like the first small step in what I want to do. And so one of my early calls was with Jonathan Hillis, who's very involved with Creator Cabins, which is a DAO outside of Austin. And I felt like their vision is something I could learn a lot from. It's very in alignment with where I want to go with things eventually, hopefully. And so I had spoke to him about hosting it there, and logistically it would have been a challenge even at the lower attendance count we were anticipating at that time. But his brother owns Camp Champions and suggested we host it there. So that was it ended up working out really, really well for us. We ended up with a final head count of 397 people. And we had cabins that we were staying in, food was provided. they had some site activities. So there were things like hatchet throwing, there was a zip line, there were water slides in the pool, and archery. And then we had a really collaborative process throughout building VibeCamp. We relied really heavily on our Discord server. And pretty much anytime somebody said, hey, I want to do this, like, can we have this thing at VibeCamp? We'd say, yeah, what can we do to help you bring it to life? And so people, it was incredible watching people come together. I really believe that even if VibeCamp had been canceled, it would still be considered a successful event in the way that I wanted it to be, because so many new connections were made throughout that process. There was a group of people that got together to do the badges, and I couldn't even keep up with all the conversation. I mean, they were posting like charts showing what size pixels you could read from different like distances, and they just went really, really deep into it. And that was something that I couldn't have done. Like my team wouldn't have had like the logistical brain space to make that happen, but it was a key part of the event. I think it really fleshed, it added a lot for people there, because we don't have a lot of times faces connected with the Abbeys. But it was really like a beautifully collaborative process.
Did you have like a sense of there's like a tight core team and then this wider community of contributors? Like how did that formation happen? Yeah, I'm kind of curious as well, actually, even to one back a step, it's like, who are you? Like how did you become authorized to do this? Like where did that sense of permission come from? And then yeah, like how did you assemble a team?
Sure. So the genesis of VibeCamp was a tweet that Grounded Sage on Twitter tweeted out in July, the end of July, I think. He said, so when's the first in-group meetup with attendance in the thousands? And I quote tweeted it. I said, you guys really want to do this? Because if you don't really care, I won't do it. But if there's enough enthusiasm, like I promise I will make it happen. And some people have been, quoting, the visa thing, like joke about the outcomes you want to see, but I was never joking. I was like, I'm going to do it. And so in that tweet, a few different people either volunteered to help or were tagged in there. Grin_IO was one of the people that got tagged, and I hadn't met him before, and he was really just one of the core contributors. We could not have done it without him. We had ended up with a team by the end of things. It was a team of 8 people, and I had weekly meetings with them starting beginning of August, I think, probably. And mostly just brainstorming for a long time. We didn't nail down a location until November. And at one point, as far as the permission goes, I was leading things or trying to encourage things to be a lot more decentralized, I suppose, than they ended up being. I mean, we're still fairly decentralized, but Grin had a call with me at one point, and he was like, it's not very efficient right now. We need you to like be the leader. You are the leader. Like you need to just, take on that role. And there were some things where it really did save a lot of time for me to just be the one who made the decisions. So it's been a really, really fascinating learning experience for me. Did that answer the question?
Yeah. I think what I'm thinking about is there must be so many people that like participate or even see it from the outside, and they disqualify themselves from thinking they could do something like that. It just seems like, wow, that's so intimidating. It's such an amazing thing you did. And I wonder kind of like what was it about you that like how did you know you could do it? Like what was the sort of background that gave you that confidence?
Oh man, that's an interesting question and a challenging one for me to answer. My backstory is a fairly unique one. I've never done any event planning. I've never even been to Burning Man. I did, however, spend a couple years on the street in Los Angeles, had a lot of drug problems, things like that. And through the course of that, I had a series of realizations that kind of just fixed my brain. I've been sober for over 2 years now, and immediately when I kind of like re-entered human society, I was telling people like I figured things out. I can do anything now. And people are like, all right, Brooke, we're glad you're not using meth anymore. So that's something that just on a personal level has been incredibly validating for me, because I had that knowledge and I knew I needed to prove it to people first. But I know that's not very helpful for other people looking in. Possibly more helpful is just one of the realizations I had was just that I was the one standing in my own way for my whole life. And I there's a lot that can go into that, but yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. That's so rad. It's a mystery to me. Like your story is unique, but there's this kind of threshold where some people will step over the threshold and recognize their own agency and be like, they become animated and creative and like powerful, you know? And I'm always curious, like, how do you get people over that threshold? And like, I know about role models, I know about encouragement, I know about appreciation, enthusiasm, all these kind of things, but they all feel like kind of only small parts of a very complex thing. And like in your story, obviously you're doing this deep interior psychological work for multiple years to then some get to some kind of breakthrough. They're like, oh, I can make stuff, I can do stuff.
Yeah.
It gives me a lot of anticipation as well for what comes next, because we'll save that. We'll talk about that later. But this is just you getting warmed up. Do you want to say a bit more about what leadership is like for you? Like you said about you wanted it to be a bit more decentralized, but then it was more efficient for you to call the shots. Like, how did you feel? Were you, was it kind of a dilemma, or like was it just pragmatic and you're happy, or yeah?
We overall we're still very, very collaborative on anything that's not a minor logistical detail. I do consult the team. We've got we are technically under an LLC wrapper. We've got I haven't really fully dived into all of that yet. I don't really understand quite how all of that stuff works, but I mean, so far it hasn't really come up. We just I'll bring things up, and if it seems like the general sentiment is a yes, we do it, and if no, then we don't, or we figure something else out.
Would you?
I realize, yes.
Would you make it after you've consulted? If you know that there's some disagreement, but you think it's the right call, would you still make the call?
That is somewhat situational. There are, I can't think of anything where I was really dead set on something and people disagreed with me and I went on it anyway. I could see there potentially being something like that, but I pretty much if everybody outweighs me, I figure like I'm probably wrong.
Yeah. I'm just thinking like, it sounds like we sometimes nerds talk about rough consensus, which is like a kind of not perfectly defined, but people kind of get what's expected of them. And that can break down at times. Like sometimes people need a really explicit, like, this is who's calling the shots and this is the process. But it just makes me think that when you've got one event, it's kind of like there's a deadline. It's obvious we're heading towards this thing, and people can, I don't know, it sort of helps people to, having that deadline kind of helps people to delegate or to just say, yeah, that's good enough. I'm not too worried, because it's like every day you're getting closer to the thing. And if you're going to step into a mode of being a more permanent organization, maybe you'll need to make these decision processes a bit more explicit, or a bit more like, these are the times where we go for consensus, and these are the times where we're really just going to take advice and then call the shots. That stuff might come up, but it's interesting to hear. It sounds like it's been really smooth.
How would you, like, what are your thoughts on that? As I was speaking, I kind of paused at one point because I was remembering the things we discussed in your microsolidarity workshop, and having sort of the more decentralized, slightly different power dynamics maybe than is typical. And I'm not sure we really quite lived up to that. And I don't know, I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are moving forward, if you think it might be in our interest to like kind of change how we do things.
Well, you did live up to it, because the approach is social fabric first, like just trust, relationships, culture, vibes, just build that relational soil first. And it's kind of like, who cares what else? Like that's the foundation. And it was just so obvious in everything that you were doing as a team, and then in the production, and everyone's response to the event was like, obviously social fabric was the main input and the main outcome. So like you're doing that, but then on top of that foundation, you can build more like action-oriented stuff, more, like more resourced organizations, more like activated teams that are very productive and so on.
Yeah.
And when you get into that stage, then you need more organizing practices, which are more like project management and governance, and less like event organizing. It's like a bit different. But the short version, I mean, the long version is, take our other online course, which takes a few weeks. But the short version is, once you've got the social fabric and you're intentionally cultivating that, that you actually have reliable processes for continuously renewing the relationships, then you just add on top of that these intentional cycles of learning and just structure the whole organization around its learning cycles. So when you've got one event, that's an obvious cycle, but if you're in a more ongoing organization, a cycle might be 1 month long or something. And at the end of every month, you stop and review together what's been going well about the way of working and what's not so good about it, what's been frustrating or like tense or annoying. And at the end of the cycle, you always choose 1 or 2 improvements. So this is not about the product, it's not about the event, it's about how we're talking to each other, how we work, how we do decision making, how we distribute power, all those sorts of things. That's the topic of that conversation. And so at the end of each cycle, we're just making these small iterative improvements. And 1 month it might be like, oh yeah, we need to tighten up our decision making. And the next month it might be, we need a conflict resolution process. And the next one is like, hey, the financial system doesn't really work. And you just can kind of incrementally get at those one by one, and you just build just-in-time structure rather than trying to articulate this whole abstract thing from day one.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I had a couple people come up and ask, like, how did you do this? And it was one step at a time, like fixing each problem as they came and changing things when they needed to be changed. I feel like you can accomplish a lot very quickly just by taking small steps, but taking them rather quickly.
And the really important thing is to close the learning loop. So like, this was part of the reason I wanted to talk to you so soon after the event, was to grab some of the lessons while they're hot. So like, this is what we call the retrospective process. Like, we've just done a thing, by all accounts was pretty awesome. There probably also were some kind of fuck ups or some kind of lessons, not just fuck ups, but also like fuck yes, like some things that you definitely want to do again, and other things which you definitely don't want to do again. And while this, all of this subtle information is kind of live in your short-term memory, it's a really good time to start uncovering that together and going like, what did we learn here? Because you'll be able to do that in 20 minutes now, but in 3 weeks' time, it'll all just be like in the fuss.
Right.
So you can structure that process into the organization. I'm curious, as I said, fuck ups and fuck years, if anything came immediately to mind.
Oh, I think one of the fuck yes, let's start there, was the cabin process. It wasn't perfect by any means. There's a lot that we can do to improve it, but it wasn't really necessary logistically. People could have just showed up and gone to a cabin and it would have been fine. But we had this whole thing in the Discord server where people were coming up with funny ideas or themes for cabins and pulling in members. And a lot of people, there were several cabins that had group video calls beforehand. They had group chats. It was a really great way for people to get to know individuals before showing up at the event. And I think that's something that I definitely want to improve on and keep using. So I think that was sort of like an accidental, like, yes, this was really essential.
Let me just double click on that. So that is an illustration of the principle for me of what I call like the fractal scales of belonging. So there's a vibe that you're cultivating in your core crew, and that's like a really small circle. And then the cabins are also small circles. And if you can, it's much easier for people to feel safe and happy and excited in that small space. And if you get a critical mass of those cabins working, then the much larger scale of like 400 people is much more likely to go. Whereas if everyone was in like just their own tent or on their own, or like didn't have that sense of meaningful connection at that smaller scale, it like really makes the large scale a lot harder. So I just wanted to grab that. What else were you about to say?
So I mean, some of the fuck ups were maybe things that we couldn't avoided. There were a few fairly minor incidents, generally involving just one person at the event, that I don't know that we could have really been more prepared for, but will inform our process going forward. We're going to like discuss and have, that was something I wanted to talk to you about later. But most of the other things were kind of just, I mean, like PayPal shut us down twice. We still don't really know why, but that could have been disastrous. They held up quite a large sum of money weeks before we were go time. So we were very fortunate to get out of that one. I can't really think of too many like major things that went wrong. It was overall, it was really, really pretty smooth.
Amazing.
Like, yeah, shockingly so. I mean, there are definitely things we can improve on, but the things that, I mean, yeah, there's just some small logistical things that got a little bit messy, but
Yeah.
I feel pretty confident that we can do better next time.
Yeah. Yes, let's have a conversation later off the record about this like bad apple. But I guess that's a general principle as well, is like community is defined by its boundaries, you know, and there needs to be
Yeah.
some way of enforcing those boundaries. When there's shit going down, you need something like one of the things that I learned from my time on the streets was not homelessness. It was participating in the Occupy movement for a few months, you know, so like being in this kind of public space and having to construct our own reality. I mean, we're working with a lot of homeless people as well. And one of the things that I learned through that like intense, tumultuous process was never make a policy in a crisis. You know, you want to have the policy ready before you want to anticipate like what are the disasters that could happen and get something intelligent in place. Rather than be in the drama of like, this person is really causing a lot of shit and we don't know what to do. And then people get very defensive or they feel threatened, and then you develop policy that turns out to be actually not ideal, and it can be really messy. So yeah, I'm down for having that private chat to unpack that a bit more. I am curious about the money. You just mentioned PayPal, and you have my condolences that you had to deal with PayPal. I learned a long time ago to ditch PayPal in favor of Stripe.
Well, we know now.
But it makes me curious though about as much as you know, you kind of mentioned you don't know too much about it, but just the kind of like legal financial infrastructure. How you know, like, were you putting up personally a lot of financial risk to make this happen? How did all this? Yeah, how do you kind of make that go?
The community, I mean, there was limited financial risk on the part of some of my team members. I wasn't really in a position to contribute to that, but it was very limited. It was like the initial deposit to the site and or to the site where we hosted at, and then like our website fees and things like that. It was pretty minimal, but the community just came together in a way that was, I don't even want to say like surprising, because I was it's kind of part of what gave me the confidence to do this, because I got that feeling that people would rally behind something like this, and they really did. We had initial donations. We ended up sponsoring 40 people. Wow. So 40 people were there completely on scholarships just from donations from the community, which was amazing and definitely something we want to keep moving forward with. And we've got, right now, a lot of us are kind of like taking on a lot of different roles as we kind of like things shake out. I've got Lithros from Twitter on the core team, and he has been phenomenal. He's got a background in law. He's also doing our finances right now, so he is both legal and finance at the moment, which will be too much if we keep going at the scaling up at the rate we think we can. But we really just made things up. we had no idea what kind of attendance we'd end up with. There was a period of time where I kind of thought this is going to be 30 of my friends in the woods, and we had a final surge of tickets that were purchased the last day of ticket sales. It increased our numbers by probably a quarter or a third, just all of a sudden at the very end. We just that was one of the fuck ups. I ended up being the one who was handling in my personal DMs all of the last minute ticket purchases. I had to send out the links, get the confirmation, add it on the Airtable, and it was overwhelming. And I said something about how I didn't think it was a good idea for me to do it, and I didn't get any immediate volunteers, and I should have stuck to my guns about that, because we were a little bit unsettled when I could not keep an eye on big picture as those things were all coming in. I had no idea how much our numbers had grown. We were sitting at like 250 to 300 people, and then all of a sudden it was 400. And some of my team were not very happy about that, because we weren't sure we could handle it. But it just happened without me. And maybe I would have decided that it was fine anyway, but I didn't like that. I kind of like let the decision be taken out of my hand by not putting myself in a place where I could kind of like monitor what was going on.
Yeah. I mean, both of those things, that example and also the money stuff, it just makes me think bottlenecks in your process can really throw a spanner in the works. Like you need to have people who are really good with systems that can help, that's their kind of leadership, is like, I'll make a really slick system here and everything's going to go, and and it's not going to get you distracted from the big picture.
Yeah, but as far as the finances go, we kind of like, we took the amount that the site was going to charge us per person, and then we just added some to it, and kind of was like, oh, 300 is like a nice round number, let's do that. We did not have any idea what buses were going to cost. Actually, well, we got a quote before we set the ticket price. We got a quote, but it would end up being wildly different because we didn't end up booking the buses until like weeks maybe before the event. So a lot of this was kind of like roughshod, but I mean, to turn around from like August to March to have an event that's successful, I think we did fairly well, but none of us got paid for it. We do have a nest egg saved for the next one, but we didn't incorporate enough of a margin to get to pay ourselves. So people on Twitter have asked, and we put up a donation link now for the org team members to get paid something. So that's pretty sweet. But we will definitely, I mean, this is not sustainable at the levels of work that this took to have it be solely a labor of love forever. So we are going to have to figure that out for the next one. But I feel pretty confident that we'll be able to do that.
You should send me the link to that donation link, and I'll put it out with this conversation as well, so people that are feeling grateful and generous can help you out. Because I mean, this is another lesson for me, is like, these things need to be sustainable. I mean, it's fine if it's a one-off. That's completely fine, that you can come in and just volunteer a huge amount of energy. And even if you didn't get paid in money, you got paid in social capital, you know, new opportunities, new connections. Everyone loves the shit out of you. You've got like 1,000 couches you can now stay on in the you know, that's something. But if it's going to be sustainable, it needs to be paying for itself. You know, it needs to be. It's difficult for people to value the work of community building for lots of reasons. Kind of like side conversation there, but for me, it's really important that we're creative and figure out business models so that the people are doing the work that you're doing are well paid for it. So it's not just like a volunteer thing that happens on the sidelines, but it can be your main gig and like really focus on it. So hopefully future gatherings have enough margin where you can actually get paid properly to do the work.
I think there's, we will be able to figure out a way. I've already had the final night of VibeCamp. We built a cuddle fort with sheets for the roof and several different little nooks everywhere and pillows and everything. It was beautiful, and had a really like enriching conversation with a few people there who were just like, Brooke, all right, how do we get you money? We need to get you money so that you can just keep doing this forever. And they were so motivated. We had a really great kind of like still in VibeCamp, but processing VibeCamp conversation. And I think there's enough motivation in the community that even if I don't have any good ideas or my team doesn't, we will be able to turn to community members and kind of like crowdsource how to do this so that it is sustainable.
Great. It leads me to think about the future, I guess. Like you did mention, you kind of had some foreshadowing that you have an enormous scope of ambition. And I'm curious to hear more about that. Like, I guess my outsider's perspective was like, there's obviously something here. It really feels like the beginning of something, not the end. And I was bringing my own bias of like, oh, is this the kind of thing where there's going to be like 100 regional vibe camps next year? Or is this the kind of thing where it's going to be, you want to keep it more coherent and like you're an organizing team and you're going to be kind of getting the ball rolling in a more centralized way? And I'm just curious, like, tell me more.
Sure. Yeah, this is a super exciting topic for me. Our intention is to publish notes on our process once we kind of like, I'm still in Austin. We need a little bit of time to get those put together, but I think it's a net benefit to the world for these kind of events to continue happening. And I'm not capable, just like, you know, we don't have the time or the ability to do them as many as I think should happen. So I would love to see these spin up. I would love for people, I haven't talked to the team about whether or not they're okay with them using the name. Whatever. These kind of events, though, we want to help make them happen as much as possible. As far as our specific team, we are still kind of in discussions about how to move forward in the short term. We one option is having it one every year at the same site, and then maybe satellite ones around the world, like maybe one smaller one in 6 months, and then the big one. But VibeCamp at that location can't ever really be that big because they have a max capacity at that site of 600 people. So we could expand a little bit, but not a lot. So there are going to be some discussions that need to go into that. But kind of like parallel to that, in kind of the same way that I kind of just kind of really believed in my heart from the beginning that VibeCamp was viable. I kind of believe that just the way the future is going to shake out for these like Twitter communities is that in like 5 to 10 years, they're going to be like globally distributed nodes of people living in geographic proximity, and all in communication with each other and sharing ideas and resources and people. And that is a very, very thrilling concept of the future for me. And I want to be a part of making at least like one node happen. And whether that's going to be with this team of people or not, I think that the momentum is there. And so I kind of like VibeCamp is a pretty cool thing. It was definitely I think a lot of people really got a lot from it, but it was also very, very intense. And I've really been enjoying these smaller scale, just like having an Airbnb with a bunch of Twitter people. And I think the utility, one of the utilities of VibeCamp is showing people what it's like to live with people that you care about. Just being able to walk up to your neighbor's cabin and say, hey, like I go to dinner. That's what I'm hoping will come out of VibeCamp, is people will have like realized that like, oh, maybe I do want to live with, with these communities of people.
I think what I just realized, one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation with you was so that I could have my vote on like the future of VibeCamp.
Yes.
and that's like, I've seen a lot of these communities get started. So like, especially regional burns, for example, where it starts out with a couple hundred people and it's just like so awesome. And then as it increases in scale, you have decreasing trust, therefore increasing conflict. And suddenly it has to professionalize a lot more, and it's kind of less vibesy and more like, shit, we're doing all of this conflict resolution and dealing with bad apples and kind of policing each other. And, like it gets difficult as it gets larger. I mean, the reason it's called micro solidarity is because I love the small,
Yeah.
So the thing that's kind of come top of mind for me now with the community building I'm doing is that if the objective is to have to sort of maximize positive social impact, then the method is cell division. Like, you could absolutely in the next couple of years be organizing events with 10,000 people there, and that could be fun, and maybe it's the right thing to do. But there's very few people that have that capacity to do the 10,000 thing, and it kind of puts you in this category of like, it's out of reach. But like you said, anyone can hire an Airbnb and invite 7 people around, and quite a few people can organize a thing with 100 people. It's like, so my sense is really about decentralizing this, like the skill of not just the skill, but the mindset and the attitude of like, I'm going to be a community host. I'm going to pull people together. I'm going to create that container for these meaningful connections and collaborations to form. I really want to decentralize that and get lots of people activated and feeling like, oh, I can do this, And like you say, it's part of this global network of lots of little hubs. That to me, I'm just moving into a phase with my work with the Inspiral community where I'm really just passionately focused on the cell division. And that comes with like financial and legal and governance implications, like we're a global network, and I'm in the process of like developing a proposal to make it a regional network with multiple hubs that are decoupled, and that there's some kind of global coherence, but it's mostly like regional autonomy. It's more like a federated structure. So I'm kind of voting for to push you in that direction.
No, that's really helpful to hear. That's
But the basic, the kind of social physics of it is the number of relationships in a group increase with the square of the number of people. So like, it's kind of like this big exponential takeoff that as more people come in, there's just way more relationships. So like, in a group of 5 people, you have like 10 relationships, but in a group of 50, you have like 1,200 relationships. So it's like, if one of those relationships blows up, suddenly you've got this big drama. And the bigger you get, the more likelihood that there's going to be these dramas, and it just sucks the fun out of it. It's really like, I just don't want to be dealing with those really large groups.
It's tough because there are so many wonderful people on Twitter, and I have not met them all yet. But I mean, maybe there could be something in doing more frequent but smaller scale things. I think we would get fairly overwhelmed with interest, and that's something that I'd like to pick your brain on. Like, how do we, like, say in 6 months we do 100-person thing somewhere else. How do we pick which 100 people to go? Because more than 100 people are going to want to go.
Yeah. I think you just have 10 of them simultaneously. so like
Oh, okay.
so I'll tell you a little bit more about Inspiral. There's like a couple hundred people. It's internationally distributed. It thinks of itself as a global network, and like I said, I'm pushing it to become regional. I'm part of a core crew that kind of put a flag in the sand a couple of years ago, saying we're going to carve off the European region and do our own thing with our own events and cultivate more local identity here. And because of the pandemic, things were delayed, but we had the first gathering last August, and I was one of the co-hosts of that gathering. It's just 15 people, it's micro. But we had the time of our lives, awesome vibe, awesome new connections, lots of like collaborations come out of it. And during that event, 2 people indicated that they'd be interested in hosting the next one. And so just seeing that energy, me and the other parts of the co-hosting team were like, yes, 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 yes. So we've just last week, actually, while you were at VibeCamp, I was at another Inspiral retreat that was hosted by those 2 people, not by me. And I was in the background. I coached them a little bit. I did some of the logistics and the finances to make it easy kind of thing, but they were front of stage, holding the space, inviting people in, setting the tone. And so now we've got twice as many people that know how to host these things, so it's this replication thing.
Oh, this is super helpful, because I had a bunch of people say, can I help plan the next one? And I've been I've been telling people to reach out to me in like a week when I'm a little bit more settled. But because of our legal wrapper, I was thinking it would be hard to have people on the central planning team. We'd have to like, I don't know. I mean, we could. I mean, something I just wanted to like think about once my brain cleared up a little bit. But that's brilliant. I can have them. I mean, a lot of people have been talking about wanting to do one in Europe and things like that. And I don't have to do it. And I don't have to tell them to wait. So what I have been saying was like, we'll publish the notes or whatever, but maybe there's something in between those things.
Yeah. I would be, I mean, I don't have enough context to know, but my sort of gut feeling is there may be some people that you can identify personally from the interactions you've already had, where you're like, you, and you, and you, I would totally trust you to host something. I'll help you in the background, but do what you want. I think it's going to be fine. Like, if you can find those people and just kind of give them permission and give them support, that way you don't have to be cutting people out. You're just saying there's lots of these small events happening. And like you say, you can still have the big global thing once a year where you have this like massive inrush. Let's have the caravan come together.
So, and feel free to not answer this if it's not information you want to share publicly. But with Inspiral, I always forget how you pronounce it. Is that correct? So with those people who hosted the retreat, did you bring them into? I mean, did they get paid for it through you guys, or was it something separate?
Yeah. So technically, we're running the events through my company, so not through the Inspiral's got legal structures, but for complicated reasons, we're using my company for now. The way that we did the first one was, it was the first one, so no one got paid. We just shared the expenses together.
Yeah.
The second one, we did the same, but then at the end we said, here's transparently all the finances. This is your share. The people who are hosting this are also paying to be here in this venue. And so if you want to cover their costs, we can share it out between us, and it's just like a voluntary contribution. And people were really generous and covered the costs. And so then the next, I think it would be kind of like the next one, I'd like to professionalize, one more step and say, can we actually pay people at least like an honorarium for their time? They might not be getting paid market rates, but at least it's like, it definitely shouldn't be costing you to do this. And ideally you should be getting at least a bit. So, and that's the thing, that's the benefit of scale, I guess. The more people you have, the easier it is to do these economies of scale and get more money in. So that's a vote for doing a larger thing. But yeah, it's not like, I don't think about it in terms of bringing people onto payroll. Like, before I got into all of this, I helped to start a co-op, and we started with 6 people that grew to like 12 co-owners of a business. And like every time I got to invite a new co-owner to take, like we have employees, but then once they've been around the block for a while, we invite them to be a co-owner. And every time I get to invite a new co-owner, it's like my responsibility and stress goes down, which is just like so awesome. Knowing that I can take a break and have a sabbatical or be sick or whatever, and people have got it. So that's kind of like the mentality that I'm bringing in, is identifying who would I want to be other co-owners of this thing. And if they're coming in with that attitude, they don't necessarily need to be paid market rates either, because they're doing it because they love it and because they've got a sense of purpose and meaning. And they might be willing to defer the payment until the thing is a bit more sustainable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you think that would work in your context?
I think so. I think that could be. I actually had a discussion with somebody about this yesterday. They were saying, yeah, the first event, maybe we just have volunteers, and the people who put in the most work, then for the next one, we work out some kind of way of getting them paid. I mean, that's what we all did. I mean,
Yeah.
I still like, even if we get, we'd have to get a fair amount of donations at this point for me to even cover my own personal costs with getting to Austin. I paid for my airfare and Airbnb and all that. Like yeah. So, but like through this process, there have been a lot of people offered to help. Most of those people did not follow through on it when we suggested things that they could do, or tried to like help, like work with them to figure out what would be a good route. So I think maybe having this, like, you run the gauntlet first kind of approach could be a really beneficial one. I'm so excited. Yes, go ahead.
The other thing I'm going to play with, well, I'm going to propose, and we'll see if the community wants it, is a kind of subscription fee, which is prepaying for your ticket. So instead of like, it costs $500, it's $50 a month. And if you want to be on the Discord, or if you want to come to the online calls or whatever, there's some kind of like bonus access that you get for that money, but it creates cash flow for the organization. And also some people will pay and then not be able to go to the event. And so that becomes like surplus that you get to share to lower the cost of the whole gathering. So I'm not sure if that's going to work, but that's an experiment I'm hoping to try soon.
Yeah, that would be a particularly good one if we were doing a number of smaller regional things.
Yeah, you get kind of like a passport, like if you're contributing at this level, and you just get to show up for free and have a good time.
Yeah. Oh, is what I was about to say earlier when I said this is so exciting. Like these are really, really challenging problems, and they make me feel alive. I love it.
Yeah. I want to say, like, what you're doing is really special. I hope you are taking the time to read all the like glowing testimonials and recognize like what you're doing is amazing. Like, it's really amazing. And to say, I'm completely here with you. Like, any support that I can offer. I love jamming on these kind of things. Like, I love these kind of problems. So if you're willing to receive my very opinionated takes, I've got an endless supply of them for you.
Yeah, I would love to. I think I'm in a better position now to receive them than I was before, because so much of what was happening was I just didn't know how it was going to go. I didn't know whether things were going to work or not. And I think now I have a much, it feels a lot more fleshed out to me. I feel like I understand kind of what happened a little bit better, and have at least like a grounding foundation of like I can, to have these kind of discussions. So I'm really, really excited, and we'll absolutely take you up on that. And yeah, I have been reading some of the Twitter things. I've also had a number of people tell me that this is one of the best weekends of their lives, which was really powerful to me. And I don't know if you saw my tweet. I got the VibeCamp logo tattooed. You probably can't see it with the headphones on, but 2 of our attendees are going to get it done today too. And that
is a big deal. That is a big deal. Yeah. It's so good, like you said at the start, that you kind of knew that you were destined for greatness, and you were convinced, but you just had to show people, and now everyone can see it. It's like, I told you.
Yeah, but I also really appreciate how supportive you've been from the beginning. I think there are a fair number of people that showed up there just to watch the disaster unfold. And I did get a lot of them come up to be like, all right, I'm sorry, I was wrong. But you were one of the people who just like, no, it's gonna go well. It's gonna be great. You guys are gonna have a great time, and there's gonna be some things that you need to do afterwards. But I appreciate that faith. Anyway.
I have faith because I could see how much social fabric you already had. Like, this is the thing that people that are not part of this part of Twitter won't understand, that there's like genuine community happening in this space. Other people call it like the hell site. They think of it as this like political tribal argument place. It's like, no, it's like a really nice place to meet people if you know how to play. And because you had that social fabric, it's like, yeah, problems are going to happen, but you'll be fine.
Yeah, yeah. I have almost every single Twitter hangout that I've gone to has just been incredible. It's harder to have a bad time when you've got such amazing people around.
And this is the other thing. Sometimes like when, we're running our trainings and programs and stuff like the one you came to, sometimes the feedback we get is like, how did you find such amazing people? And I'm like, I think it's not how I think about it. It's like we create a context and an invitation and all the right people show up, and like, okay, maybe 1 in 500 is going to be a bit of an issue you're going to have to deal with, because I mean, even there's a higher fraction of the population than that is psychopaths. But like for the most part, you just create the context and the invitation, and all the awesome people show up, and then they get to know each other, and then the magic happens. And so like I'm relentlessly focused on context and invitation.
Oh, also, just I would like to figure out a little bit more about like logistically. So, yes, I think that hosting a lot of smaller, like more frequent, smaller events would be the way to handle the higher attendance numbers. But I still think like, for the very first couple, until it becomes like kind of like a less of like an exciting new thing, we are going to run up to those kind of problems. Do you have any recommendations for? I mean, we could give priority to people who already went, or we could. I don't know. I'm not really sure how to. I don't like the idea of. I want things to be inclusive, but we cannot be as inclusive as yeah.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think my immediate instinct is to kind of bring that question to the community and ask the people who are most engaged. Maybe as a core team, you can cook up some options to start the conversation. But just be honest, like we don't really know. We think it has to be this way. It seems like we're going to have to make a compromise, whichever option we choose, and just get a kind of read from the community and be transparent about it.
Yeah, I'm going to put out a survey soon. Hopefully today. I want to get it out. Like you were saying, while things are still fresh for people, I want to get some feedback from the attendees. Do you have any recommendations for questions that you think should be on there?
Yeah, at least my opinion on doing surveys is people are happy to answer a survey if it's short. So just keep it as short as possible. So one question: can you tell me anything you appreciated about this that you think we should definitely do again? And then what was something where you could see some room for improvement? One thing, one suggestion for how we can improve, some constructive criticism. And like, that's the minimum. And then you might want to add some questions about like, you might want to use the opportunity to identify potential volunteers that are going to contribute more in future, or, a few things like that. But just those like appreciations and improvements, if you just get that, you'll find a lot of people will be willing to answer because it's short instead of like 57 questions.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I appreciate that.
We're getting to the top of the hour, which is when I predicted my brain would start to like get a bit fuzzy, which is currently happening. I have got tons of questions here still, but I think I'd like to wrap up pretty soon. And sure. I'm really happy to keep this conversation going in private or in public, as you prefer.
Yes.
Part of this as well, I mean, like, part of the reason I'm recording these conversations, it's all part of the mission to decentralize these skills and these lessons so that there's people in different contexts that can hear your story and go like, oh, right, yeah, I never thought of that, and get, like, it's like accelerating the learning process for us all. So we can wrap up soon, but it doesn't have to be the end. And I'm curious if there's other kind of last thoughts that are on your mind that you'd really like to talk about before we press the stop button.
I mean, no, too many. We'll put a pause. We'll put a pause on this, and I would love to. I'm so happy with the building a public process that we've had. I think it was so fun for people in the lead up to VibeCamp to go back and see the tweets where it began to be built and as it was built over time. And I think that's I think that's really been a special thing for people and for myself to be a part of. And I would like to keep that going. I think that there's a lot of strength in building in public. And so if you ever want to just power through some things on the timeline with me for people to read as we like figure out like how to do stuff, I would love that. I'm very interested in that kind of thing.
We need like a digital archaeologist to start, like a librarian.
Yeah.
There must be someone already in the community that loves that kind of thing, that can actually build kind of like the history of VibeCamp through tweets.
Yeah.
That would be epic.
Yeah. I think somebody will probably eventually someone's going to get interested enough in VibeCamp to just do that. I think
Yeah, I
that'll
mean,
probably just
you've always got to think about the future historians that are like celebrating your achievements, right?
happen. What's that? Were you making fun of me? Oh
No, I'm not. This is how I live my life. This is why so much of my life is in public, to make it easy on the future historians.
no. Okay, good. Good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. This is part of the visa thing of joking about the outcomes you want, you know?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the, oh,
yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. Thank you for the
yeah,
time. And let's stop it here.
cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.